All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, June 19th. Happy Fed Day, everybody. And wow, well, at least like that is over with for the week. That was the big overhang for the markets was the Fed meeting. And, I think especially the press conference. Just echoing some of the thoughts that I had earlier, I was definitely concerned about Powell into this meeting. I thought the market expectations were too high, anticipating Fed cuts, but it seems like Powell threaded the needle in terms of what he had to say. He mentioned that the market could warrant more, or I shouldn't say more, but a cut of interest rates. I think they're still data dependent, and they want to make sure that more data comes out to prove that. But I think, just in conclusion, without going into too much detail, uh, it seems like right now, with the Fed being there if needed, and the market is definitely pricing in a rate cut for July. I think the win is at the Bulls' backs right now, and goes back to the saying, don't really want to fight what the Fed is doing if they're certainly going to do that. These were some of the statements that were made today that we kind of just threw in as the conference was going on. But yeah, I'm always more very worried, especially the track record that Powell has. I think this is maybe just the second time that from an FOMC meeting out of however many meetings he's had so far that the market has actually gone up. So maybe he's getting a little bit better at it. But no, overall, I think very satisfied with what he had to say. I think it was a very tough uh, a tough meeting in terms of the expectations were so high for what he had to say. So let's go through some of the movers today because it's important when you have one of these events to kind of find and notice which names are performing well. So I've got my spreadsheet up that I've been showing basically every day in these videos, talking about what's performed well after the open. And certainly there's a couple surprising names in here, right? I mean, because of course, I think most investors are focused on what's happening in equities, but you could see what actually performed pretty well today. TLT just finished up 14 basis for the day, but from where it was this morning, I think it was down about 30, 40 basis points, and it rallied pretty hard after the Fed decision and the press conference. Gold as well. Look at gold up 88 basis points. So this is going to, before I get into the equity moves, might as well talk about gold a little bit. I've been very hesitant with gold. I've been looking at it a lot, but haven't pulled the trigger on it. I think gold is so difficult. It's very herky jerky. But if it closes, I've been waiting for this to kind of close above. And again, I don't mind being late with this one because I'm looking at a really big, I think a long-term trend, right? So as of now, we've got two more days, and gold does these crazy moves, so the week is not over. But if we close above 1343, I'm a buyer, and have no problem now putting on a trade in this space. But just wanted a little bit of confirmation that we're going to be closing above value. Then I've got my firm stop that I can use, right? And then can look for obviously targets to the upside. But I always want to know where I would get out. And certainly don't want to get in when it does something like this. This was last week, which was a bit of a doji candle. So, I think this is very interesting. And we continue to see call buying in this XME. This is metals and mining. For a second day, we saw some activity in this space. So, a little bit something different. This had some continuation. Look at the volume. Also in the cash market, this looks like it's saying something different. So possibly you could look for a move now that it's above the 50-day moving average. Again, not up that much, relative to how deep of a downtrend this thing is in. But maybe you could look for a move to 29. But man, look at that volume again on the move up. So. And of course, with any one of these ETFs that I go over, you could always dig in and find which group or which subgroup or which name, because as I went over in yesterday's video, XME, metals and mining, there's a lot of different names in here. You have steel names as well as gold miners, as well as all kinds of miners or more diversified miners than gold. So you can kind of, and I'll probably be doing that in the next couple days, just kind of sifting through this ETF and figuring out what has the better technical setup, because I still don't love, I'm a trend trader, so this is below the 200-day moving average, and it's got a lot of stuff to get through. But that's how trend starts. Trends have to start from someplace. But I think there will be some better setups. I just need a little bit of time to go through this group, right? So I'm always welcoming new groups that kind of show some strength and possible change in trend. And then GDX is continuing to move higher too. Again, long base for this one. And I think at the weekly chart, that is also looks very similar to what GLD looks on that weekly chart. So we'll start there. Get that out of the way because that is the group that went up the most today from open to close. Utilities are right back to 52-week highs again. So XLU. Remember what again? With rates staying up there, and I'll show the TLT. Huge trade that I followed today, that I went into today, that hit the tape today, which went up about an hour before FOMC started. So keep in mind they went out to July, and I don't have the rationale. It looks like they rebooked this trade, but they did this big 93,000 of the July 128, 126 puts. Really, when you look at this, you're like, oh, well, it's only for 26 cents, not a big deal. But 92,000 of these, that's like a $2.4 million outlay of premium that somebody paid for this, thinking that TLT actually comes in a little bit. So TLT, we talked about yesterday, took out that version point of control. It did not make it over that level today. So, we'll see if something changes, but, it's still in a very bullish trend and clearly did not break any of the short-term moving averages. So, besides the action on the tape with that big put spread, I think, of course, price is king, and if you want to wait until that thing actually breaks the 5-day, maybe that trade will work. And again, they didn't go out. It's not a weekly trade. They did go out to July, so maybe something on the horizon comes up. Who knows? G20 meeting. Don't know their intent, the buyer's intent of that big spread. But while this is going on, right? It's you could call it defensive, but I think also just really rate sensitive, right? If bonds are going to continue to go higher, then places that and yields go lower, there's going to be a thirst for yield. So you might continue to see XLU and things like XLP, which we did see a put buyer in this, and IYR, ITB, which had a rough day today but came back. I think there was a little bit of call buying in some of the home builders today into the weakness. So you got kind of a floating hammer in there today. I think we saw a call spread earlier in Lennar, and I think a little bit of calls outright in Lennar. Why don't we go ahead and look at that chart? Yeah, I mean, kind of a crazy looking bar there as well. I think Lennar has to get back above value. I tried trading Lennar a couple weeks ago, made a tiny bit of money on it, but it kind of stalled out here, which is where I decided to dump it. But it needs to get back above this version point of control, even though we do see some call buying. But with interest rates low, on the long curve, remember mortgages are usually tied to the long end of the curve, and with TLTs going up, then I would think that should entice some people to buy some homes. So I would think this group is going to be pretty decent. So as long as rates kind of stay down here, so that's a few names, and then of course what my favorite out of the bunch, which continues to be the software group. And I was kind of watching this at the end of the day, once Powell concluded his remarks. We did see some Microsoft. So what call buyers did we see while Powell was speaking? We saw a little bit of Microsoft. We saw a little bit of Netflix. We saw a little bit of Shopify. We saw a couple other trades, similar to that. But I mean, this thing looks great. Unfortunately, if you've looked at these options before, the market maker in the market maker, there's no reason for these market makers to be a liquid to show really wide bid ask spreads because the components are super liquid. So remember, for an ETF, the liquidity is not just the ETF itself; it's the underlying basket. So if you happen to know the market maker of IGV, there's no reason why they shouldn't be trading these tighter. Every time I look at the spreads going out like a month or 2 months, they're like either a 60 cents wide or sometimes even like $1 wide. So it's really frustrating. Of course, you could trade this in cash, but I think this thing looks great. It is showing a break of value, so 216.50 could be your support here. And then, look at some of the names. It's pretty crazy. These are your market leaders. And they remain, I think as well as the defensive names like the utilities. Just to go through a couple of these names, and then I'll tell you what I traded today. But if you go to Okta, Coop, Shop, and I mean, this is unreal. I mean, Shopify had, I think it was their analyst day today, and they said that they were coming out with a whole bunch of features. Look at the volume on this thing explode higher, 327. It's remarkable. And it's remarkable to see a whole group like this. Viva Systems is another one. I mean, these things are just on fire. And then Oracle came out with earnings after the close today, and which I don't view them as one of the leaders in this space. And they're up decently. They're up to 54. Keep in mind Adobe beat earnings too. So I'll tell you a couple of names that I have my eye on and I did add a position to this in Ring. I like that I was watching to see if this Virgin point of control would be taken out. Sometimes that's necessary for like a downside, but I think it's getting pretty tight in here. We've seen some July call buying a couple times. I forget the name of the broker came out and put a nice, I think, 140 price target on this. Sorry that it's escaping me. I also like RPD. Sticking with the R's, RPD is really coiled and looks pretty decent here. I got long this name yesterday, so no positive P&L yet in these names, but looks pretty good. ZS is another name that we talked about a little bit in the trading room today too. Zscaler, is another name that looks like it's ready to make 52-week highs as well. So very, very impressive, this group. And we did not do a webinar today. I'm at the Benzinga event tomorrow. If you can make that event, would love to answer questions and so forth. But TTD is another one that someone just wrote in the chat. Also, I mean, this is just, I think, crazy to see this group doing this. What else to kind of look at for the day? I also added a little bit of CMG the other day. This is into support. I think this one wants to break out as well further. Look at the check back to support. I also like MasterCard as well. I think these names, just for whatever reason, just haven't had any momentum and have been sitting back a little bit. Now's the time that I think you want to get involved. You don't want to chase. You've got support right there for MasterCard of 252.67. So you could tell, I'm actually I'm more enthused now that we've got the Fed meeting behind us. Going back to the S&P chart, we've gotten above, we broke out of this really tight range in 2900. That can be your support right now, but barring anything on the tape, which of course there will always be unexpected things. I think we're seeing some areas really show some strength. By the way, Now is another one too, Service Now, but of course, everybody wants to look at the FANG stocks. Amazon, okay today. I am a holder of Amazon in my long-term account. It's got to break through 1915. Facebook had some good momentum the last couple of days, but that's in value. Netflix, like I said, there was some calls that went up. Netflix also has to break value. Netflix could get interesting if it happens to get back above value. Interesting. 5 days down days? I thought it was due for a bounce, but maybe it wants to actually get outside of this range. I would honestly wait till 370. But I mean, this group, for as much as people pay attention to it, it just doesn't have much momentum to me. What's the other one? Oh, and Google too. I just think there's better opportunities than what the FANG stocks uh, are showing in terms of this. Microsoft also made, I think, a new 52-week high. As I mentioned, there was a little bit of calls there. All right, so I think that's enough for today for the Fed meeting. We had a live session during the day. I put on yesterday a SPY hedge. I said it yesterday. I'm okay if I lose the money in that. I'm going to lose the money in that. That's fine. It kind of keeps me in trades knowing that I've got a hedge on in SPY. So I'm okay with losing money on as a hedge, right? I mean, a hedge is basically an insurance policy. You don't ever really want to cash in an insurance policy, right? I was talking about that earlier in the room. When you buy a flood policy or when you buy a homeowner's policy, you don't want a flood to kind of collect on the on the flood premium. So it's kind of the same way as a hedge, right? So anyway, we'll end it here for the video, and we've got 2 more days in front of us, so we'll see what we get for the rest of the week. But I'm definitely more enthused now that we have the Fed meeting behind us. Have a great night, everybody, and see you guys tomorrow in the trading room.